Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So you see what we're covering this morning. 3 verses. We're at the beginning of chapter 10 of Uddhava Gita. As you see from the painting, we're in Dwarka with Uddhava falling at the feet of Krishna, appealing in various ways, particularly how to overcome attachment to the material conception of life. And I wanted to begin. We're going to have several pages of reading this morning, but still I want to go back to a question that came yesterday or day before from Vishalaksha about the function of shiksha guru in relation to diksha guru. It's connected with text 31, where there's this description that the Avadhuta Brahman had many gurus, and then all this discussion about normally there's one guru, but in this case he had many gurus, and how to understand all that. Because in this chapter, this text 5, I think it's all going to be lots of commentary on text 5. It's apparently in direct contradiction to text 31 of the previous chapter, where text 5 of this chapter says one guru, and 31 says many gurus. So how to reconcile? So the relationship between diksha guru, shiksha guru was the topic we spent some time with. His question specifically was, is the primary function of shiksha guru to connect the disciple of diksha guru to diksha guru? And my reply was, the primary function is to connect one with Krishna, and that doesn't discount the diksha guru, but the primary function is connect one to Krishna. That's a guru function. I wanted to add some points, several points. Etiquette-wise, it is a duty of a shiksha guru to speak shiksha or instructions that are in harmony with diksha guru's instructions. Or say it negatively, it's a disqualification. One is not a shiksha guru if one contradicts diksha guru's teachings. So if someone asks, such and such, how do I understand such and such? Then it's the shiksha guru's duty to understand, what does your diksha guru say? I mean, I've been asked that question sometimes. Some people out there say this, and some people say that. How to properly understand this and that. And sometimes I'll say, let me consider this carefully. And then offline, go to their diksha guru and say, what's your response to this? Because I want to support what you say. Unless if I disagree with what you say, let me discuss with you that disagreement. But when I go back to your disciple, I want to be able to say what you say. Or another is just ask them, when you ask this question of your diksha guru, what does he say? And then support it, or say, let me consider this carefully, and go back to diksha guru and have a discussion with Diksha Guru, not with the disciple that says, wait a minute, that's rubbish. Or, discredit what the Diksha Guru says. It's a function. A part of the Shiksha Guru function in relation to Diksha Guru is to support, not specifically to connect with, because there's a prior assumption that someone is coming to Shiksha Guru. There is a connection with Diksha Guru. That's Diksha. And with Diksha, prior to Diksha, commonly, not universally, but commonly, there's Shiksha that precedes Diksha. So from that Diksha Guru, they've already given Shiksha. So there's a presumption that if someone else comes along who's inspiring an already existing disciple, a Diksha disciple of someone, now they're inspired by the Shiksha of someone, they already have some Shiksha. They already have it. And certainly in ISKCON, it's Prabhupada. So a Shiksha Guru must support what Prabhupada says. A Shiksha Guru must support what their Diksha Guru says. That's an etiquette. Along with, what I said the other day, connecting one with Krishna, make the Krishna connection stronger. And if one, let's say, another etiquette consideration, if one has a conflict with a particular Diksha Guru, then they shouldn't become a Shiksha Guru of someone who is the Diksha disciple of someone with whom they have a conflict. Shouldn't take that position, because what's in is going to come out. And so, they can, politely or discreetly or somehow or other excuse themselves from that relationship. And I'd like to reiterate something that I said before. Thinking of oneself, I said it 3 times. I'll say it now the 4th time. Thinking of oneself as Shiksha Guru can be a risky business or a slippery slope, or, a sign of some spiritual problem in that person if they think of themselves as Shiksha Guru. Someone may think of them as Shiksha Guru, but if they think of themselves, the false ego thing, that's my identity. That's problematic spiritually. All of us, in the broader sense, we're giving teachings. We hear, we internalize, and we give what we've internalized. According to our realizations, we give. So you're all Shiksha Gurus in a broad sense. You're reminding other people of Krishna. In a broad sense, you're Shiksha Gurus. And if you think that's who I am, there's a problem. You're just you're a postal peon, as Prabhupada's words. Not I'm a Shiksha Guru, because I'm giving instructions. Ruled by false ego, it's a disqualification. Steeped in genuine spiritual humility, not the material kind, but genuine spiritual kind, that's where we're Krishna's servants. And we may have some relationship with someone, that's okay, but it's just we're servants. We're servants. Okay, so that was some further thought on this etiquette question and function question. Now we're ready for Canto 11, Chapter 10, Text 2. Translation. A purified soul should see that because the conditioned souls who are dedicated to sense gratification have falsely accepted the objects of sense pleasure as truth, all their endeavors are doomed to failure. Now remember, the overarching, what this chapter is doing is, having described this knowledge and detachment position of the Avadhuta Brahman, here's a description of how to get there. That's this chapter. Here's Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. A transcendentalist should see that because the conditioned souls who are dedicated to sense gratification have falsely accepted the objects of sense pleasure as reality, all of their endeavors are doomed to failure. Mogasha moga karma no moga jnana vichetasaha. Same as Bhagavad Gita message. BBT purport. In this verse, the Lord describes the process of becoming desireless. All material sense objects, including those perceived by their form, taste, flavor, touch, or sound, are temporary. We now see our family and nation, but ultimately they will disappear. Even our own body by which we perceive them will disappear. Thus, the inevitable result of material enjoyment is viparyaya, or great suffering. The word vishuddhatma indicates those who have purified themselves by executing the regulative duties of devotional service. They can clearly see the hopeless frustration of material life, and thus they become akatmatma, or great souls free from material desire. Bhaktisiddhanta's purport, very short. When the conditioned souls come to realize the utter futility of their endeavors to enjoy the temporary manifestations of this world, they certainly become detached. You could say the converse. If they don't, they won't. The utter futility. And Bhaktisiddhanta's gloss of Vishwanath's commentary. How is it possible to give up material desires? The reply given here is that one should see the disastrous result obtained by materialistic people who consider the temporary manifestations of this world to be ultimate reality. By such an observation, one will certainly become detached from the aspiration to enjoy such objects that will disappear in due course of time. And here's the actual commentary of Vishwanath, and that's it for this verse. By meditation on his spiritual goal in relation to happiness from sense objects, the purified soul should see that all endeavors of persons dedicated to material enjoyment give opposite results, which is true. I mean, there are very short ways of saying this, but one who desires material happiness is guaranteeing misery. That was one of the verses specifically from the previous chapters. One who understands that material desires bring misery will also understand that real happiness is being free from material desire. But then they have to have spiritual desire. That's how that lacuna or space or emptiness, loneliness, whatever, is filled by spiritual desire. Then there's real happiness. Finally, how does one become free of material desires? ? By meditation on his spiritual goal in relation to the happiness derived from sense objects. What's the happiness derived from sense objects? Spiritual happiness is service. Something out there. Oh, here's an opportunity to serve Krishna. Let me offer this flower to Krishna, or something something, see the beautiful sunset and appreciate Krishna and so forth. He should see that all endeavors give opposite results, material endeavors. He should see this repeatedly. Becoming convinced of this, he then becomes devoid of material desires. Now there's a really cute graphic for this. I think you'll like it. A purified soul should see that because the conditioned souls who are dedicated to sense gratification have falsely accepted the object of sense pleasure as truth, all of their endeavors are doomed to failure. Cool graphic for sure. And here's the flip side. The word Vishuddhatma indicates those who have purified themselves by executing the regulative duties of devotional service. They can clearly see the hopeless frustration of material life, and thus they become Katmatma, or great souls, free from material desire. So it's a monk of some kind. But he doesn't have a shaved head, so he can't be a Hare Krishna guy. Not a Buddhist monk either. Okay, so we're moving on to the translation for text number 3. One who is sleeping, so this is the metaphor, the sleeping metaphor. One who is sleeping may see many objects of sense gratification in a dream, but such pleasurable things are merely creations of the mind and are thus ultimately useless. Now this is Krishna to Uddhava, kind of like summarizing what he's been explaining. Similarly, the living entity, who is asleep to his spiritual identity, also sees many sense objects. But these innumerable objects of temporary gratification are creation of the Lord's illusory potency and have no permanent existence. One who meditates upon them, impelled by the senses, uselessly engages his intelligence. Really good. It's similar to Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? Here's Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. A sleeping person may see many objects of sense gratification in his dreams, but such things are merely creations of his mind and are thus of no benefit to him. Similarly, one who is asleep to his spiritual identity sees many objects in this world, but they are all creations of the Lord's illusory potency and have no permanent existence. One who meditates upon the temporary objects of the senses therefore uselessly engages his intelligence. And the BBT purport: because the fruits of material work are temporary, it ultimately does not matter whether or not one obtains them. The final result is the same. Materialistic activities can never award the highest perfection of life, Krishna consciousness. The material intelligence, impelled by the senses, strongly desires sense gratification. As stated here, Vedhatma Dhi. Vedhatma Dhi. Such intelligence actually separates one from one's real self-interest. Thus, the intelligence absorbed in that which is materially favorable and unfavorable becomes divided in pursuit of innumerable categories of material advancement. bahushaka anantascha, that verse. Such divided intelligence is impotent and cannot understand the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. The devotees of the Lord, however, have their intelligence fixed on one point, Lord Krishna. They meditate upon the Lord's form, qualities, pastimes, and devotees, and thus their intelligence is never separated from the absolute truth, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, one of our favorite verses, Vyavasayatmika buddhir, etc. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. If one is not Krishna conscious, he is uselessly dreaming without any understanding of his eternal situation. The material intelligence will always devise novel means of achieving happiness, and therefore one bounces from one fruitive program of sense gratification to another, ignoring the simple fact that all material things are temporary and will disappear. In this way, one's intelligence becomes infected with material lust and greed, and such infected intelligence cannot bring one to the true goal of life. One should hear from the bona fide spiritual master whose intelligence is pure, and then one will come to Krishna consciousness, the highest perfection of life. And really short Bhaktisiddhanta purport, one sentence, kind of uncharacteristic of him, but the sense objects observed in one's dreams are of no value, just as the objects seen in the waking state are ultimately useless because they are temporary. And then his gloss of Vishwanath's commentary. Because the results of material work are temporary, they cannot provide one with lasting benefit and are thus considered useless. Materialistic activities can never bring one to the perfection of life or free one from the pangs of material existence. Material intelligence, when impelled by the senses, strongly desires sense gratification and thus separates one from one's real interest, real self-interest. Such diverted intelligence will never be able to understand the absolute truth, the personality of God, Sri Krishna. The devotees of the Lord, however, fix their intelligence upon him by meditating upon his form, qualities, pastimes, and devotees. This is the BBT purport is taking from here. In this way, their intelligence is never separated from the absolute truth, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, Vyavasayatmika Bodhi verse, and then the translation. And here is Vishwanath's commentary. Because material results are destructible, they are equivalent of their non-attainment. I'll read that again. Because material results are destructible, they are equivalent of their non-attainment. I think it means two. Spiritual results are not obtainable by material senses. That is explained in this verse. Because of taking support of many material objects, these perceptions in sleep have no spiritual result. Because the intelligence takes support of various material objects, Vedhatma, again, because the intelligence takes support of various material objects by the material senses, it yields no spiritual result. So that's material, so just read it again. We'll say material intelligence. Because the material intelligence takes support of various material objects by the material senses, it yields no spiritual result. Intelligence simply being individually aware of various objects made of the gunas by means of the senses does not yield spiritual results. The results are like objects experienced in dreams, generated from the mind, since they take support of material objects, either auspicious or inauspicious. But intelligence which takes support of the Lord alone yields spiritual results. There is oneness in this perception of intelligence concerning the Lord's form, qualities, pastimes, and devotees, since one cannot separate them, since they are all spiritual and since they are all auspicious. It is said, Vyavasayatmika Buddhi verse. And we'll end. I think I'm not going to go to text 4 because of time. Jiva Goswami's Krama Sandarbha reads, that first comes the translation, just as objects seen in dreams or in the waking mind yield no spiritual results since they depend on material objects, intelligence depending on material objects using the material senses yields no spiritual results. And then his commentary, material intelligence, seeing external differences with the senses, does not become spiritual intelligence or bhakti, perceiving spiritual difference. Since spiritual intelligence is one with the form of the Lord, its object of perception. You know that phrase that's popular these days, I'm spiritual but not religious? That's a whole topic. So here's some really cute graphics. Get ready. One who is sleeping may see many objects of sense gratification. There's money bags and a soft bed in a dream. But such pleasurable things are merely creations of the mind and are thus ultimately useless. Similarly, the living entity who is asleep to his spiritual identity also sees many sense objects, but these innumerable objects of temporary gratification are creations of the Lord's illusory potency and have no permanent existence. One who meditates upon them, impelled by the senses, uselessly engages his intelligence. Here's another interesting graphic. She's really good. The transition for the slides is also good. If one is not Krishna conscious, he is uselessly dreaming without any understanding of his eternal situation. The material intelligence will always devise novel means of achieving happiness, and therefore one bounces from one fruitless program of sense gratification to another, ignoring the simple fact that all material things are temporary and will disappear. So, that's the thing at the upper left, that's the thoughts, a house, vacation, money and treasury and family and intoxication and whatever are those contemplations, temporary and will disappear. And finally, one should hear from the bona fide spiritual master whose intelligence is pure, and then one will come to Krishna consciousness, the highest perfection of life. I recall going through the first 3 chapters and thinking, you know what? By going through all this, the reader by Vyasadev's design or Krishna speaking to Uddhava in this way is going to go, I get it, I get it, I get it. Okay, okay. Knowledge and detachment. But it's not quite like that. That's like the fruit, but then how do you get there? And you won't get there as long as there is this standard phenomena of seeing objects as, the word that's being used is reality, or sat, or of substance. And so enjoyment is connecting with those objects of enjoyment, and that's happiness. And then, then the unhappiness, all of that stuff. Why do bad things happen to good people and all that? What, somebody's good, why do they have hardship? Not right. And it happens. It happens. Without giving examples, just, visiting homes during this short visits, there's a family member who just disappears due to something. And so there's the reality, and that so of the sensibility of emotion. I'm having this discussion with a teenager who's really moved by the pandemic and wants to move their career into I don't know how to describe what their contemplation is, but the health industry, I guess, where there's plans to work with how to relieve people from the grief that comes from loss. I don't know, I'm probably not saying it properly, but they're really moved by the amount of grief that's in the world due to the pandemic, and what to do about the grief that's in the world due to pandemic. You can't do anything about the pandemic. I mean, you can take measures, but many people are being infected, and some people are suffering a lot, and they can recover, etc., etc. And then so many people die, and you know people that died, and there's all this grief in the world, and how to help process all the grief in this world that's unavoidable, because there's objects that one becomes naturally. You'd be, quite impersonal if you didn't have any feelings about those who are close to you and they die, and all of that. So it's like there's lots of opportunity for that kind of profession. And so what does a transcendentalist do? What's Krishna's teaching about all of that? It doesn't mean there's something, you're still covered by Maya if you feel grief. Supposing, an ISKCON item is Pankajangri's departure. It took some time, and then a lot of people that really didn't even have much association with him, but they know of him, or they had some interaction or something like that. They're feeling something, a whole ocean of feelings of people that are feeling a loss, and all of that, looking around and seeing all these exalted devotees that are one by one disappearing one way or another. And, there's some feeling of loss. That's not Maya. It's a loss. But to see it in relation to the principle is to see in relation to Krishna. So let's say the soul of Pankajangri has gone to Krishna. On what basis do we say that? His life of devotion to Krishna. So we should celebrate. He's gone to Krishna. And there's still, at the same time, there's some sadness that association is not available anymore. And there are many persons that don't have that higher realization, and they're feeling less of grief. The persons, particularly, let's say, the persons in Mayapur, or persons who have had some association from visiting Mayapur, and there's a loss. Anyway, the topic that's being covered by Krishna to Uddhava is very relevant. It's philosophical, but it's very relevant. And so how can there be detachment? Detachment doesn't mean you're numb. Detachment means you're not attached to the temporary, and you're attached to the eternal. So the message is that we're hearing in these two verses is, as long as there's a sense of the objects out there, like the objects in a dream, they're real. The objects out there are real, and there's an opportunity for enjoying, and that's one's contemplation of happiness, is the objects that are out there and interacting with them. So that brings the senses and the mind and the material intelligence some sense of happiness. Then you can't be detached. And there is a different option. That was the previous 3 chapters. And the person that's being spoken to is King Yadu from the previous chapters, and Uddhava, who is a grahastha. So it's not just, sannyasi talk or avadhuta talk. It's embodied souls understanding Krishna's message and how to move from the attached to the detached. And a big part of it is to see the temporary nature of all things. And that was part of this discussion with this teenager, is see the temporary nature of all things. And if you want to really help people deal with the feelings of the loss of the temporary, help them understand the nature of the temporary. Doesn't mean become numb, but it means you can have those feelings of loss, but you go to the eternal side rather than the temporal side. Easier said than done, but that's the principle. Okay, let's see if there's some discussion. Okay, nothing. Anything online? Okay. She has something.
This question is not like related to today. Like, it's so like recently I've been having to I had to like research about like Hinduism
About
from like Hinduism.
Hinduism.
Yeah, from like for school, and I've noticed that like a lot of like what I found is like they say like Brahman is like absolute. So like I'm wondering, how did this get out there? Like how is it so like popular, this like whole Mayavadi philosophy? Like yeah.
Well, Brahman is absolute. Brahman is, but it's incomplete. And how does somebody take shelter of something that's incomplete? Well, they have aversion to being subordinate and submissive and devoted to a supreme person. Why do people come to the material world? So that's why it's popular. It matches their disposition. Now, it's within the Vedas. How is it derived? It's derived because it's within the Vedas. Brahman is the absolute. But then what is that? They don't get that what the Vaishnavas get. Whenever the word Brahman is there, it's indicating the Parabrahman. It's implied. If it's not explicit, it's implicit. Brahman means Parabrahman. But, they have aversion to Parabrahman. Raga Dvesha. You know the verse from Bhagavad Gita? Raga and Dvesha. Raga is attraction, Dvesha is repulsion towards Parabrahman. That's what brings us here. And so someone comes up with an idea of what's spiritual, it's not Parabrahman. It's the highest truth. Something other. And that's me. And you, and we're all Brahman. It's aversion, dvesha, towards the Supreme Person. That's why it's popular. It's not yummy. There's no rasa. But the sense of contentment, because I just negated all the bad stuff, and now I'm over here in the Brahman stuff. The contentment of calling that stuff a bad name just doesn't exist. And I'm over here. That you can't live in that realm. It's not, people don't live in that realm. They do stuff. They involve with stuff. It's notional. It's not practical. But it's comfortable. Just call it a bad name.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. It's related to today's class that you were talking about, how we get carried away with things in the material world. Although we know that spiritual is eternal, not material. I'm able to relate that to myself. And I think I need help in in keeping boundaries and not to get carried away. At present, I think I feel like I'm getting carried away by work, and I want to, I know I'm doing something wrong there. I need to balance that out.
No,
and
it's not wrong
I
or
don't
balanced. That's just, you're a practicing sadhaka that is not yet fully realized. And when you see it's happening practically all the time anyways, but when you see that you're moving in the direction of identifying with and attracted to and the happiness and distress with the temporary, when you see that that's going on, you hit the pause button. And however many times you have to hit the pause button, that's however many times. And then you go to sat. And the best practice, discipline-wise, is japa. Because then it makes, the practical activities more possible to be in transcendence while engaging with the temporary. And see them as temporary. And not just get lost in the temporary. So it's stay with sat, even while you're engaged with the temporary. So the best is the Shravanam Kirtanam period of your day, every day, every day, every day. And for the next however many, as long as you live, absorption in that spiritual sound vibration, starting with the name, but the other, just as we're doing right now. If there's absorption in what we're doing right now, then the temporary just, it's not pressing on you. And then as soon as we finish, then, I've got to, this and that. So the do the this and the that is fine, but see it in relation to sat. That's the bhakti life. We're not impersonalists. We don't, turn the switch off. We engage. But in relation to. That's, so it's just practice. and the purification that comes from the sound vibration, and giving rapt attention to that sound vibration. That's how you won't get swept, using your phrase, get swept away. You'll get swept away, and then you bring it back because you have this spiritual Shakti that's come from proper and attentive hearing. It's easy to say it, and it's another thing to do it. But that's our bhakti life, resting upon sound and the quality of our making sound and hearing sound. I saw him moving his hand that to kind of tell he's got something.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have one comment and one question.
A comment and a question.
Yeah. When you're telling in today's class, I had this feeling when I was listening to Bhagavad Gita that whatever you are happy with, the material thing will get you distress. So if you're happy with money, you lose it and you feel distress. Or if you're happy with eating some sweets, you get sugar and you get distress. This was what my feeling went through. That's what I wanted to tell.
Okay.
And the question is from yesterday's Ramayana class. When Prabhuji was asking why whoever Rama killed did not go back to Godhead, I just have this question. Did Ravana went back to Godhead after Rama killed?
No. It's right. No. He had another term.
Okay.
Kamsa, and he became Kamsa.
Oh, okay.
Because that was the curse of the four Kumaras. You know that story, right?
Yeah, vaguely.
The
not
four
completely.
Kumaras were at the gates of Vaikuntha, and Jai and Vijay prohibited them. So they were cursed to take 3 births as demons. There's more detail. So Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, Ravana, Kumbhakarna, and Shishupal, not Kamsa, Shishupal and Dantavakra.
Thank you. Got it.
And now a little detail so far, I have to do some further checking, but one of our Ramayana scholars consulted with one of his Sri Vaishnava scholar friends, and where the Rakshasas that were killed by Ramchandra went was the heavenly realm that, according to his terminology, was Vira Swarga. Now, I don't know what that is, so don't ask me, but I'm going to see if I can find out what that is. But, killed in battle, they go to heaven, but not Vaikuntha. But
Yeah.
that
got
wasn't your question. I'm
Yes.
just adding.
it. Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
Question from Visalaksha Prabhu. What is material intelligence and spiritual intelligence? And what are steps needed to purify intelligence from the oceans of material desire?
Well, the second question was specifically discussed in the purports. The difference between material intelligence and spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence is how to